Once you have the power supply, the switches, the LEDs, and the relay in place and soldered, I'll show you now a way that you can verify that everything is correct. First, let's verify that the LEDs are working. Now, there are 10 LEDs in this LED light bar. We are only using the bottom 8. These top 2 are not being used. The connection through a current limiting resistor in the ground has already been made using this resistor network here off to the right. So all we need in order to complete the circuit is bring our power source, our positive, over to these connections. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a wire here, and we'll make that connection then between our VDD. VDD is the positive in our power supply, and that's the 4 connections here to the right part of this 1x8 connector. So if I connect from VDD to the connection corresponding to the LED and have my board powered on, you'll see then that I have my LED on. So I've made my connection from VDD over here to the connection corresponding to this LED. I can then go ahead and move it down 1 hole and verify that the next LED is on. And I can repeat that for all of the LED connections. So that one works, that one works, that one, that one, that one, and that one. So simply by taking your VDD connection, moving it down through all 8, you should see all 8 one at a time come on. Now, to test the switches, all we need to be able to do is complete a circuit. So the ones on the left side of the switch are the connections to the switches on one side. The connector that's to the right is the other side of the switch. There are 2 connections corresponding to each side of the switch. So these first 2 go to that switch, the next 2 to that switch, the next 2, and then the next 2 finally for the last one of those switches. So if I take my VDD connection and connect it to the left side of the switch. So I've gone from my VDD to my left side of the switch. If I now go from the right side of my switch to my LED, I can check and see if my switch works. So right now you'll see that the LED is on. If I take my screwdriver and slide the switch into the other position, it goes off just as it should. So I can verify that my switch is working. I can repeat that for the other switches. So I'm going to skip down to the 3rd hole, which corresponds to the 2nd switch. I'm going to move my LED down to correspond, and again check my switch. So I can repeat that for the other 2 switches, checking that they are functional. Now for the relay, remember, is in a socket. What you'll want to do is, if you look at the relay, you'll see that there are 2 pins. Looks like an opening, and then you'll see 3 pins on one side. We want the side that has the 2 pins by themselves towards the top, and then place that into the socket. So it's going to look like that. The ones with those 2 pins, that corresponds to the coil. So we need to provide power to that coil in order to energize it. There is a polarity associated with that because of my flyback diode. The positive is on the top, the negative is on the bottom. So if I make my connection from my VSS, which is my ground, over to my negative, excuse me for a second there, alright. So I've got my connection from my VSS over to my ground. And I'm using a black wire, so it's a little bit harder to see. I prefer to use black because that corresponds to my ground. Then I need to take and make a connection from my VDD over to my other connection, the positive on my relay. When I do that, I should hear a click. I don't know if you can hear that. That tells me that that relay, internally, it's an electromechanical relay, is switching. And that's the way that I'll verify that my relay and my circuit is working correctly. So I've shown you how you can go ahead and check your LEDs, check your switches, and check your relay.